While blood, sweat, and the smell of death lingered between the trembling fingers of the midwife, the cold stone walls of Pembroke Castle echoed with the screams of a child. Yes, a child. And on this merciless night of winter 1457, everyone knew this. Margaret Beaufort should never have become pregnant. In the next 15 minutes, I will tell you the story that medieval historians have been sanitizing for centuries. The horror experienced when a 12-year-old girl was forcibly married. To a man twice her age, what happened when this man refused to wait. This is not just a story about medieval marriage customs. It's the story of how one man's greed permanently destroyed a child's body, how England's most powerful people turned a blind eye to it, and how that traumatized little girl became the most feared woman of Tudor England. What you will hear comes directly from contemporary sources, medical records, and the shocking confession made by Margaret's own priest after her death. But here's the even more disturbing part. Margaret's story was not unique. Even by medieval standards, it was part of a system that people knew was wrong but did anyway. Imagine this. May 31st, 1443, a girl is born at Bletsoe Castle in Bedfordshire. Her name is Margaret, and from the moment she takes her first breath, she is not a child but a commodity. Her father, John Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, is one of England's most powerful men, but within a year of Margaret's birth he is found dead under mysterious circumstances. Whispers spread quickly. Suicide. In medieval England, taking one's own life was not only a sin but a disgrace that tainted your entire family, and suddenly baby Margaret was not just an heiress but vulnerable prey. Before Margaret even learned to walk, the vultures had already gathered because this one-year-old baby possessed a fortune that would excite grown men. Lands, titles, wealth, all in a package small enough to fit in a cradle. Her mother, Margaret Beauchamp, tried to protect her daughter, kept her close, raised her in a loving environment with her step-siblings, gave little Margaret an exceptional education, taught her to read French, nurtured her sharp intellect. For a moment you might think this story could have a different ending, but King Henry VI had other plans. When Margaret was only 3 years old, the king gave her away like a prize to William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, and the Duke immediately did what predators do. He married this 3-year-old girl to his 7-year-old son John. A 3-year-old bride, let those words leave a bitter taste in your mouth because she probably couldn't even properly pronounce the words spoken at the ceremony. The wedding likely took place between January to February 1450. They needed papal dispensation because they were related, and the Pope approved this in August 1450. Even the church was complicit. But Suffolk's plan backfired magnificently. He was arrested and killed in 1453, and little Margaret was on the market again. That's when King Henry VI made the decision that would ruin her life. He gave her to the Tudor brothers. Edmund and Jasper Tudor were the king's half-brothers, born from their mother's marriage to a Welsh servant. They were ambitious and had influence at court. 24-year-old Edmund Tudor married 12-year-old Margaret Beaufort on November 1st, 1455. Now you need to understand something important about medieval England. While early marriages occurred, there were customs about when they should be finalized. Typically, this would wait until the girl was at least 14 years old. This was practical because people understood that young age posed health risks during pregnancy and childbirth. Historian Elizabeth Norton explains the customs of that era, noting that while marriages could be arranged early, certain aspects were delayed until the individuals were older. Edmund had financial motivations. In medieval law, inheritance worked in specific ways. If an heiress passed away without children, her lands returned to her family. However, if she had given birth, her husband would retain control of the properties. Edmund was focused on securing Margaret's considerable fortune. By April 1456, Margaret was expecting a child at age 12. The situation became more difficult in July 1456 when Edmund was captured and imprisoned in Carmarthen Castle. In November, he passed away from plague. Margaret was now 13 years old, 7 months pregnant, and without her husband. Despite the advanced pregnancy, despite winter weather, she traveled to Pembroke Castle seeking protection from her brother-in-law, Jasper Tudor. On January 28, 1457, she went into labor. Complications arose immediately. Margaret was very small for her age. Historical records describe her as small and delicate. Her young age created significant challenges during the delivery. The process was lengthy and difficult. The aftermath tells us much about what occurred. Although Margaret married again later in life, she never had another child. In an era when women commonly had many children, Margaret Beaufort had only one. Her son survived. They named him Henry, who would become Henry VII, founder of the Tudor Dynasty. Margaret's priest John Fisher made a notable statement after her death in 1509. He described the birth as remarkable, given Margaret's small stature and young age at the time. Modern historical analysis helps us understand the challenges faced by young mothers in medieval times. Early childbirth could result in serious health complications and lasting effects. Margaret's life was also shaped by significant losses. She lost her father at a young age, became widowed while pregnant, and faced a life-threatening delivery at 13. These experiences profoundly influenced her relationship with her son and her later actions. Historians note that Margaret's experiences informed her perspectives throughout her life, including her concerns about marriage customs and the welfare of young people in similar situations. Decades later, when her own granddaughter, Margaret Tudor, was betrothed at a young age to the King of Scotland, Margaret opposed this arrangement. She worked with her daughter-in-law Elizabeth to convince Henry VII to reconsider. Historical records note Margaret's concerns about the young age of her granddaughter. 50 years later, Margaret still remembered her own early marriage. Nevertheless, young Margaret Tudor was sent to Scotland and married at 13, repeating a similar pattern from the previous generation. This makes Margaret's story historically significant. It provides insight into how political power functioned in medieval England, and how strategic marriages were arranged for dynastic purposes. Margaret became one of England's most influential women, serving as the king's mother and wielding considerable political influence. However, she carried the effects of her early experiences throughout her life and was unable to prevent similar circumstances for her granddaughter. Modern historians approach this period with careful analysis. Some note that Margaret chose to be buried near Edmund, though scholars recognize that early life experiences can shape perspectives in complex ways. When authority figures present situations to young people as normal and expected, those views are often internalized. Historical records indicate that even by medieval standards, customs existed regarding appropriate practices. The customary minimum age was 14, and noble families frequently made formal agreements. Edmund's actions departed from these customs, which was notable even in that era. The system permitted this because Margaret was viewed primarily as valuable property with lands and titles. This historical context shaped the Tudor dynasty. Henry VII's path to the throne came through these circumstances. Every Tudor monarch, including Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I, traces their lineage through Margaret's line. Margaret survived her early hardships and achieved remarkable success. She founded colleges at Cambridge, became a patron of education, wielded political power, and signed documents as Margaret R. When she passed away on June 29, 1509, 5 days after her 66th birthday, she had outlived 4 husbands, witnessed her son become king, saw her grandson ascend to the throne, accumulated tremendous influence, and shaped English history. However, the difficulties of her youth at 13 had lasting effects on her health. This historical context often receives less attention in popular Tudor history. We frequently discuss Henry VIII's marital history and Elizabeth I's accomplishments, but less often examine the challenging circumstances that established the dynasty. Margaret's historical experience remains educationally relevant today as we study how societies have evolved in protecting young people. Margaret's life demonstrates both survival and achievement, though these came with personal costs. Historical accounts suggest that those present at her son's birth considered it remarkable, given the difficult circumstances. Her survival was indeed extraordinary, though it resulted from a situation that could have been prevented through better protections. The complete historical narrative deserves examination, not only Margaret's later achievements but also her earlier challenges. Understanding the full context of historical power structures and their human costs helps us appreciate how societies have progressed. Margaret could not change her own circumstances or prevent similar situations for her granddaughter, but studying her story honors her historical significance. She was 12 years old when she married a 24-year-old man. By the standards of that time and ours, this raises important questions about power, protection, and the treatment of young people throughout history. When viewing portraits of Henry VII or reading about Elizabeth I, it's important to remember the historical circumstances that established the Tudor dynasty. These circumstances involved Margaret Beaufort's early marriage, at age 12, to a 24-year-old man, and the serious health challenges she faced at age 13. This historical reality represents the cost of dynastic ambition in medieval England. Margaret's experience reflects a system where young people, particularly girls, were treated as political and economic assets rather than individuals deserving protection. Margaret passed away still holding the religious beliefs of her time, likely viewing her experiences through the lens of divine will and duty as she had been taught. She may never have recognized that she deserved different treatment, that young people deserve protection from exploitation regardless of political or financial motivations. Modern understanding makes clear several important principles. Young people cannot provide meaningful consent to adult relationships. Early marriage of minors constitutes a form of harm. Edmund's actions were inappropriate by any era's standards, including those of his own time. Margaret's identity extends beyond her role as mother to a king. She was someone who experienced serious hardship in youth and later attempted to protect others, including her granddaughter, from similar circumstances. While she could not prevent the repetition of these patterns in her own family, her story serves an important educational purpose. Perhaps Margaret's most significant legacy is not her founding of colleges or her political influence, but rather the historical lesson her life provides. Her story demonstrates what occurs when societies fail to protect their young people from exploitation. She was 12 years old. This historical fact should be remembered when discussing Tudor history. The dynasty's origins involved a 12-year-old girl whose welfare was sacrificed for financial and political gain by those who should have been her protectors. This represents a difficult truth within Tudor history that deserves acknowledgement. Margaret was 12 years old, and that fact alone should have been sufficient reason to protect her from the circumstances she faced. The past has more secrets to tell. Subscribe to uncover them.